Dragon Age was always a series unique in the fact that your choices mattered across games. Most other games, even ones with huge varieties of choice, did not let your choices fully carry over between games, or at least didn't integrate them fully. For example, the Walking Dead games by Telltale, some of my favourite games of all time, whilst having a lot of choice, there wasn't too much continuity between games. Most of the characters who were meant to die would die, if you know what I mean, in the first game and continue to the second game. There was no way to, in the end, save Lee or anything. Now, that is the same for so many of these games. For the Fallout franchise, for example, all games are standalone titles, so whilst your choices matter a lot in the world, in the game, Fallout 4, Fallout 3, whatever, they don't carry over between games. Dragon Age was unique in the fact that your choices did carry over. So, for example, your choices in Dragon Age Origins carried over to Inquisition and to Dragon Age 2. In Dragon Age 2, what you did with Alistair, if you made him, the king, if you exiled him, that would show in the new game. There'd be some small references to what was happening in the world where you left it in the first Dragon Age, in the second one. Zevran, people would pop up, depending on what you'd done, they'd react differently. And Inquisition perfectly kind of tied this up, because Inquisition had your choices from both games matter. So Isabella could show up, Queen Honora could show up, Alistair could show up, and a huge host of characters from the first and second games would appear. Hawke, for example, the main character of the second game. It was a perfect way of tying the series together. Dragon Age Veilguard missed the mark at such a fundamental level that the game was doomed to fail, even if the gameplay had been brilliant. Now, only 3 choices carry over from Dragon Age Inquisition alone to Veilguard, none from 1 and none from 2. Your choices are effectively irrelevant in the first 2 games, and the only choices that matter in Inquisition are who was your romance, did you disband the Inquisition, and what did you do with Solus? Those are the only 3, and they were all in the Trespasser DLC right at the end of Inquisition. So effectively, hundreds of hours of choices and gameplay reduced to maybe 1 hour, a 1 hour period at the end of Dragon Age Inquisition, which is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. And this is where the Veilguard missed the mark so fundamentally. I personally would have put up with the bad gameplay, with the lackluster dialogue, if I could see my choices from the first 3 games pretty reflected. It didn't even really need to be too massive, but the fact that Morrigan is effectively reduced to an absolute shell, I don't know what the game developers were thinking when they did this. I actually have no idea. She's one of the most popular characters, obviously at the first game. She was in the third game, and again, your choices around her really mattered. And yet, in the 4th game, she is just a shell, just a random NPC, effectively. And another fan favourite, Leliana, in the first game, in the second game, and in the third game. Your choices for her matter throughout, and yet she is totally ignored in this game. She is a fundamental character of the series, of the franchise, one of the most important characters in the game. Alistair, again, all 3 games, fan favourite, not even mentioned. Queen Honora from the first game, Loghain, Hawke, Isabella, none of these guys are really mentioned. Isabella is the only character, I believe, who is in there slightly, as like a little cameo, and that's it. It's her, Dorian, and the Inquisitor, and a couple more, not major characters. And I think they really, really missed the mark here, because they just needed to have, a couple of maybe even codex entries. If it was saying, Queen Honora is ruling Ferelden with the hero of Ferelden. But now we will never know what happened to the hero of Ferelden, because, for example, at a point in Inquisition, when you talk to Morrigan or to Leliana, or if you read the Codex, if you went with Queen Honora, it effectively says the hero of Ferelden was going to try and find a cure for the calling, for the Grey Warden sickness that ends their life. And it would be nice if that could have been wrapped up, but it wasn't. It was not even touched upon. And I think the game went in such a ridiculously backward direction to where it should have gone, because at the end of the day, the first game, the second game, and the third game, they all could have been standalone. You could play, 1 and 2 and 3 together, but you could also only play 1 or only play 2 and only play 3. I started with Inquisition not playing the first 2, and I loved it. And when I went back, I played 1 and 2. Like, the continuity between the games was great, but obviously you could have played them as a standalone title, but the continuity between them was what made the series so unique and stand out so much, in my opinion. And the fact that all of your choices were totally missed, right, is one major issue I have with the game. But the biggest issue alongside of that is how this game just doesn't seem to follow the story of the first three games. The tone is totally different, as has been touched upon by a lot of reviewers and a lot of fans of the game. But the fact that they have effectively decided to go so far away from all of the first three games and all of your choices and everything that mattered and all the characters, it is ridiculous, because I don't think they knew what they were doing with this game. Obviously there were so much development changes, but still, you have to wonder if these guys were even fans of the first three games, if they even played the first three games. To make a title this disconnected is frankly unbelievable. I am a massive Dragon Age fan. I played Inquisition, I played 1, I played 2. I completed all of them. I 100%ed the first two games. I loved them. I still do love them. They're two of my favourite games ever. 1 is probably in my top 5 games of all time. And they just went totally different. They went totally away from what this should have been, what this title should have been. They didn't follow the theme. They didn't follow the vibe of the game. They didn't follow anything. And I just don't understand, because obviously there's a lot of things about political correctness. The game was already very politically correct in Dragon Age 1, Dragon Age 2, but it had darker themes. It did political correctness in the correct way. It didn't do it forcing it like in The Veilguard. It did it in a very nuanced kind of way, and in my opinion, how art should be presented in the video game spheres. But a lot of the reason people played Inquisition, especially long-time fans, is because of a connection of other characters, and so people want to see how their stories ended. I, for one, thought I was 100% going to buy the new game, but I haven't bought it yet. I haven't even touched the game, because I'm just so outraged with how they handled it. It's almost like, if you can imagine, The Walking Dead, for example, a very, very good show. If in, season 4, they just decided, do you know what? We're going to shift the story away from these characters, and we're going to bring Rick back, maybe for a little cameo, but that's all we're going to do. It's effectively like what Telltale did with the third Walking Dead game, A New Frontier, where they totally shifted focus away from Clementine's story and put her as a background character, and that was horrifically received by long-time fans of the game. Obviously, if you look at some games which are considered, Dragon Age The Veilguard is considered a terrible Dragon Age and a mediocre game, right? If they had made this game exceptional, right, but not not a Dragon Age game, but an exceptional RPG, like Metal Gear Solid 5 was. It was a pretty awful Metal Gear, but one of the greatest games ever made, in my opinion. Then they could have at least had that to fall back on. They would have annoyed the core Dragon Age fan base, but they would have had a huge RPG fan base, brought new fans in, maybe even brought, fans into the older games. But instead they made a lackluster RPG, a blatant cash grab, which thankfully has underperformed. And I really hope that one day there's a 5th Dragon Age which manages to rectify the mistakes of this one, but it's a long shot, and it's really let me down. The fact that your choices meant nothing, the fact that it didn't carry over. And so here's a short kind of rant review, whatever. I'm really upset with the game. Okay, it's taken me a while to make this video because I've been very annoyed at the, what's happened to a franchise I love a lot. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this kind of different type of video. If you want to see more of this type of video, let me know. If anyone's even watched this part, I doubt you would have. But anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.